Hey, what is up, guys? You got your host here, Israel Trujillo, and we got with us our other host, Nick Prendes Brizuela. And today we are going to invade atheist pages. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. So we're gonna have an admin that it's gonna be sharing like right now as we are speaking. They're gonna be sharing these video on several atheist pages. So if you're an atheist watching this stream, you can comment in the stream as many questions as you want. We're going to be answering them, and we're going to have one more apologist join us pretty soon. So whatever questions you have, even if you're a Christian, you can be asking us questions too, or something that an atheist has asked you before, or something that maybe a question about Christianity too, about the existence of God, about the reliability of the Bible, the reliability of or the historicity of the Bible, problems in the Old Testament, any type of stuff like that. You guys can answer. Ask us any questions. So feel free to put them in the chat. Nick, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing well, man. How are you doing?
Doing great. You ready, man? Is this your first time?
Yep. First time. Let's go.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, we haven't gotten any questions from atheists yet.
Yeah.
They're still sharing. They probably got about like 4 or 5 pages from now. But why don't we start with some of the misconceptions that new atheists have on Christianity? Some of the most popular that you have encountered from new atheists.
Right. So I know new atheists. I'm trying to think of arguments that are specifically unique to them that differentiate them from classical atheists. But I think one of the biggest things is would they really enjoy the work of Bart Ehrman as it relates to New Testament history and how they believe the reliability of manuscripts. But maybe it'd be helpful also. So new atheism, just so we're on the same page, we're addressing the idea of that atheists lack a belief fundamentally in God rather than they do not actively believe in God. Right, just so we're...
Yeah, some of the things that that I think is one of the most popular is in epistemology, usually where they ask, prove the existence of God, or there's not enough evidence, or you guys haven't proven the existence of God yet. And what they mean is not actually that like the typical mantra that there's no evidence, which is actually abandoned. It's been abandoned by most new atheists. They realize that there is actually evidence, and there's like 15 types of evidence, and theists have evidence in several of these 15 types. I mean, some of these 15 types is some of the ones that they even fall into courts also. But yeah, so even argumentation, even logical arguments can also be counted as evidence. And so the problem of asking this question of do we have any evidence, or do you have any proof, is that whenever you bring them an argument, you bring them evidence of the resurrection or any of this type of stuff, they usually they dismiss it. So they need some Cartesian certainty for whatever you're arguing for. And the problem is they don't put that same amount of evidence of Cartesian certainty needed for absolutely anything else And where we
Right.
usually go is in abductive reasoning, which has 6 components: explanatory power, explanatory scope, ad hocness, accord, parsimoniousness, and how it competes against other hypotheses. Inductive reasoning, a pattern, a continuous pattern that seems to be present, and deductive reasoning, something that a conclusion that it's derived logically from the premises, and that's usually enough argumentation for a case. That's what we go for. Not we don't go for. We don't go for Cartesian certainty, but we are having some questions right now. St. Paul asks, "Are arguments evidence?"
Arguments are evidence? Question mark. So are arguments evidence? I would say that you use evidence in your argumentation as you're trying to present something. So I mean, in a nutshell, arguments are fundamentally different from distinct direct evidence. I would say that evidence can build up your argument, but arguments in of themselves can be indirect evidence that leads you to that direct evidence, I would say, if we're making a distinction between types of evidence.
Yeah, I would say I would disagree a little bit with that. I do tend I go for the 15 types of evidence, and it's not that I just think, but even in court cases, they do use logical arguments for let's say when it's impossible for someone to be in the right crime scene at the time it happened because they were in Norway and they saw the cameras there. I mean, that is logical argumentation, or when there's only like eyewitness testimony. Eyewitness testimony, it's a different category. It's not empirical. So there is logical argumentation that it's taken as actual evidence, and it's part of the 15 types of evidence. So let's say if we can make scenarios that may or may not correspond to reality, but we can make fictitious scenarios in which if we put a deductive case, we do get the premises to fall to a conclusion correctly, even if we cannot prove it scientifically. And let's say, for example, the argument a syllogism such as Aristotle is a human, all humans are mortal, therefore Aristotle is mortal. So I mean, that is historical because Aristotle is a historical character. It's also something that you cannot prove because, unless you want to kill the whole human race to see if there's one human that is not immortal. So it's something that we got to assume, and we assume it based on induction, but you never know. There may be an immortal one. So it's based on the premises. So you start with the premise that all humans are mortal. So if you start from that premise, if you accept it, then it'll follow logically to the rest. But yeah, St. Paul is asking other questions. I'm not convinced by the evidence presented for the resurrection. Well, I mean, it depends what you have encountered. So if he's probably has encountered the minimal facts case, I'm not sure if that's what the only thing he has encountered. But for example, the maximal data case is just a ton of evidence piled up in one place, and it takes a big while to unpack. But I guess he can. You can ask maybe what is St. Paul. You can ask maybe what you think is not sufficient evidence. But I don't know if you want to comment something about the resurrection.
Yeah. Yeah, in regards to that, yeah, I would echo what my fellow host just said. I'm We can't just assume what evidence you have heard, so it depends on that. And at the same time, just because you haven't been convinced of any evidence yet doesn't mean that something isn't true. Like, for instance, depending on who you talk to, there are people who aren't convinced that the moon landing really happened. Just because they're not convinced doesn't mean it's true, even if there's all this evidence that people outright deny. So,
Um, Yeah, cool. And I agree a lot to that. So mostly that we gotta argue philosophically for whatever historical data that we have, and usually you're gonna get more into abductive reasoning in some of these. And I think this was exploited a lot in the debate between Bart Ehrman and William Lane Craig.
mm-hmm.
That I don't think he was expecting it. He was like expecting uh, like some historical case as he's used to, but he brought
Mm-hmm.
like how it is a best explanation and based on background facts of it, and
Right.
so I think it's overlapping a little bit with what he's asking over here. What's the direct evidence? So I think there's a problem in asking a direct evidence. I mean, what do you mean by direct evidence? Because we can talk about the scholarly consensus on historians. So
Mm-hmm.
the consensus pretty much gave up on competing hypotheses against the resurrection claim. They tried the swoon theory. They tried
Mm-hmm.
um, so one of them is about replacement. They tried the hallucinations. They
Right.
tried the survival hypothesis, like that Jesus actually survived and like appeared to the disciples. But I mean, if
Mm-hmm.
he appears like all like mashed up and pretty much destroyed physically, like how are people even going to believe that he's resurrected? So they there's all these dozens and dozens of hypotheses that they did try to put him in competition against the resurrection. They didn't work. So atheists and agnostics decided, okay, we're not going to try to present the competing hypotheses. We're just going to say, oh, we don't know. But
Mm-hmm.
it's also not the resurrection. I mean, like, come on, guys. Like if you cannot put a competing hypothesis, if you get into philosophy and we're talking about inferences to best explanation, then it is more rational to put the resurrection as a in abductive reasoning. The sixth part is competing hypotheses, which is why we're talking about competing hypotheses. So if no other hypotheses can compete against the resurrection, we are the best explanation. Therefore, it is more rational to believe the resurrection. That is what we argue. I don't know what you mean by direct evidence, but yeah, we may go into the next question. So you can ask as many questions as you want, Sam Paul. We don't have that many people asking, so you can ask as many as you want. Um, Sam Paul asks, "How is a person dying and rising from the dead ever a good explanation for something?" You want to take that one?
Let's see. How is a person dying and rising from the dead ever a good explanation for something? Well, the thing is exactly that. It's an explanation. I don't know of any other explanations that's trying to answer. That's trying to answer one specific explanation for an event that occurred in history. We still know for a fact that there's an empty tomb. So this isn't just saying, oh, this is an explanation for all things. This is an explanation for a very instant thing. And the issue is that atheists and most scholarship opposed to Christianity haven't been able to produce an equal or better alternative explanation for what occurred. Christian scholarship still has the argument that has the best explanation for what happened. And a big factor is, since it's for a very specific event, we need to be able to then look what is the evidence presented. I'm sure you stated that you've heard and haven't been convinced. There's the fact that there is early attestation of Christians believing in this. The records in the historical documents, both Christian and non-Christian, I'm pretty Josephus makes the claim that the Christians believed in this during his time period. And another thing is, in the Gospels, we see the clear thing that women are told to have found the tomb first, and their witness wasn't counted as much back then. There's the evidence that I think is the greatest, and the fact that the tomb is still empty today. I think that's the greatest evidence that we have, because it's empty, and all those in history would have had to done to disprove the resurrection is just provide a body. That's all they would have had to do. If it really didn't happen, it wouldn't be that hard. And even if the apostles, let's say, stole it, somebody down the line, there would still be a body to turn up and bring about and show to people.
Yeah, I think some of what St. Paul, I think I believe what he's trying to get at. So I think it's trying to say kind of like bring the a priori rejection that it is an incredible claim for him. So as if I was claiming, oh yeah, there's a giraffe with in a skateboard flying in my room. I mean, that's pretty incredible. And he, like usually some atheists do have these skepticism, and they're like, oh no, but I mean, for the existence of God, like why is it more rational to, and they put whatever labels that they heard about God, and they they just try to make it as improbable as they want to put it. The thing is that it's not the same case. So, I mean, we can start a whole case in all pretty much all areas of study. It is, we have some of the most prominent scholars in different areas, in different branches. But yeah, some of where I would go is, for example, we can start with inductive reasoning. So part of the case will be on how pretty much almost every tribe and every civilization ever in human history, even in ancient times, even till today, they seem to have a natural tendency towards theism. And not just to theism, but to monotheism. So they made studies on these tribes that are like, they have a pantheon of gods. And they realized that many of those times, once you get deep into studying the roots of them, they are diluted actually. And they started with a monotheistic version of God, and then diluted into a pantheon of like thousands of gods for pretty much everything. So there is a natural sense for the humans for theism, and not just for that, for monotheism. And we have a long history of claimed miracles in Christianity, and also even in false religions too, which is predicted by Christianity. So even if so they usually try to bring a kind of like a fake bill argument, like, oh no, well, you got all sorts of bills, so like no bills are true, since we all the ones we found are bad, so therefore every single bill is it's also a false bill. But I mean, there's true bills out there. Not because you find a bunch of false bills, it means that there's no true bill. That is one way, through induction. And also, I'm going to bring another inductive principles from the era of Jesus, and on miracles and documented miracles, and like well documented miracles. So with the studies of J.P. Moreland and Candy Gunther Brown and Gary Habermas on near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences, and sort of even deathbed experiences by some of them. I'm not sure if they touch on those, but there's another scholar that I didn't mention that does touch on deathbed experiences. Like there is a lot of them everywhere in every single country, in every yeah, pretty much in every country there is claims of miracles, and there's statistics on, for example, on medical in medical studies that I think it was like 60% of doctors believe in miracles. Then there's another percentage that are skeptical, and then there's like a small percentage that they say that they don't. And I mean, if we're going to talk miracles, who would you expect to be most closest to that? I mean, sick people in the hospitals. So I mean, you expect doctors to be some of those, and we see those studies there. Also, there's studies in the Middle East of Jesus appearing to Muslims that have never heard of him before. And that's just about miracles, because we're talking about a miracle. But I mean, if we're gonna add to the existence of God, so what the atheist is claiming, the atheist is assuming physicalism. They're assuming physicalism, and I mean, if you're at the very least, if you're just a physicalist, you have massive problems on your everyday life, on justifying something. You gotta be at least Platonic, but we can go as far. I would say the most parsimonious is idealism and the digital physics argument. So, I mean, if by assuming physicalism, I mean you cannot just reject it for an a priori assumption of physicalism. I think that's absolutely terrible. So then we can get into arguments for the existence of God and more, and of course the evidence that that my friend Nick presented, and we can go into much more. I mean, it will be unending. So I guess you can take on this question of St. Paul. What do you mean they don't work? So maybe talk about some of the hypotheses and that have failed and how some of them are refuted. If you can bring some examples, Nick.
Yeah. I know for the most popular, you mentioned it in passing, the idea that the disciples and those who recorded the accounts of the resurrection witnessed them, as told in the Gospels, they just had a mass hysteria and a mass hallucination. And the thing is, I mean, scientifically, it's attempting to provide evidence for an event that somebody's doubtful of with another thing that we have no scientific basis for. So it's attempting to solve what somebody believes to be a myth or to be false with another thing that is definitively proven to be false with, I mean, at least according to modern scientific standards. There's no cases of mass hysteria ever recorded or mass hallucinations, let alone the fact that this resurrected Jesus, as proclaimed in the Gospels, met with different people at different time periods. So it wasn't even during the same time period that these hallucinations would have occurred in. So I think that's something very important. Another argument that I often hear, I'm trying to remember the exact name for it. It's I believe it has to do with conversion, whether about the Apostle Paul in resurrecting, that he had a conversion guilt, and that's why he witnessed the resurrected Jesus. But something like that, it doesn't seem to answer all the questions that we have on what went on, because Jesus didn't only appear to Paul as recorded in the Bible, but things that Jesus told Paul then occurred afterwards as well. For instance, Ananias coming to help and teach Paul the ways and things like that. So there are just a lot more questions with the way atheists typically try to answer the resurrection, disprove the resurrection, rather than making things clear. It leaves a lot more fog than clearing up the fog, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and I want to add something about the hallucinations. So it reminded me of the debate Willem and Craig with I forgot the name of the guy, but Keith Parsons. Yeah, Keith Parsons. So he asked them, Willem and Craig asked them, okay, what would it take for you to be convinced? And he was giving all these things. Oh, if I saw a sign in the sky that said, "Oh, God exists," and if he appeared to me in this glorious form in front of me, then I would believe. And he was like, "Well, how you know you're not having a hallucination?"
Right.
And the crowd just went totally off, like totally crazy. And yeah, it's a problem because I mean, it can never be justified. So let's say that you're entirely justified, or even like Matt Dillahunty, like you can go straight crazy like Matt Dillahunty and be like when they ask them if someone chopped your someone's head and they put it back in the name of Jesus, will you believe? No.
No.
And that is insane. And the thing is that so if we take their skepticism where it leads, I mean, it will be impossible to prove the resurrection through appearances because, I mean, you will be doubting yourself or you wouldn't be able to communicate it to other people. So yes, you were justified, but how would these other people be justified if there's no other way to be justified about it? So it'll be impossible. Even if you had the craziest experiences, the craziest miracles about the existence of God, like there's always going to be ways to put skepticism on skepticism. So that's why we do abductive reasoning and not Cartesian certainty. But I guess we go with the next question. The body was St. Paul asking, the body was most likely dumped after he died in a ditch. So, I mean, we can talk about abductive reasoning, what I was mentioning. Like, for example, in abductive reasoning, there's explanatory power, explanatory scope, and let's start with explanatory scope. In explanatory scope, if you put a hypothesis, which this is a hypothesis, it has to fit all the data that it's trying to explain. So it has to explain as much data as possible. The problem is, let's say that the body was dumped in a ditch. It explains, let's say, the crucifixion, and it could explain some other stuff like that, but it wouldn't explain the apostles believing the resurrection, the 500, that's all the resurrection. It wouldn't explain miracles that accompany that. It wouldn't explain the enemies of the faith, like the Jews, validating that Jesus was doing miracles. Like there's a bunch of stuff that it doesn't explain. So if you have two hypotheses, it's not about Cartesian certainty. It's about who explains the evidence better, or has a better scope, or goes deep inside the explanation and as an explanatory power. You also check for accord, which is how is it in accord with commonly held beliefs. And so that's where the atheist could be like, oh no, it's more believable since it's since we don't see people rising for the death more often. But I mean, if we do see miracles happen we can make an inductive case throughout history in different civilizations and people being theistic and proving idealism. It keeps raising and raising the bar in accord. So there's ways to fight accord. It's not necessarily a point for them. Not sure if you want to add something.
Yeah, I the only thing I can think of off the top of my head is one more instance where you were saying about the apostles, just the fact that even Jesus's own family were in doubt, except for Mary, his mom. but his brothers eventually, according to historical documents, came to faith. And that is insane to think that if his body was just dumped, his family would have been aware of that. There would be no reason for family to eventually come to faith in Christ, and let alone fact that miracles assume uniformity in nature. And if nature is uniform, we need to get down to the bottom of, okay, what is the cause for that uniformity? Because if everything is just random, then okay, everything's just random and we need to live consistently with that. But if we assume uniformity, then yes, miracles would be special events of, in our presuppositions, God acting in his creation. And even let's say uniformity doesn't really exist, then there would be no reason to doubt miracles at all, because anything can happen. It's just a free for all. So regardless of which stance you take, I mean, you have to address the fact of miracles.
Yeah, and I agree a lot with that. So let's move into another question. So he says, just to be clear, it's not atheists, it's non-Christians who doubt the resurrection. So yeah, I guess you can put other skeptics into it. Then they bring a question, well, that's just false. Muslims believe that Jesus was a Muslim. So I'm not sure where he's trying to go with that. You know where he's trying to go with that?
I'm not quite sure. Yeah, I'm missing what you're commenting on there.
Yeah. Yeah, but the thing is that let's say some of the claims that Islam tries to make, uh, they they need the whatever is a dispute in textual criticism, they need that parts in dispute to favor Islam. But things that we know for sure that even skeptics admit don't help, like even hinder Islam. So even the unbeliever consensus favors Christianity over Islam, especially in a fact such as the death of I'm sorry, the resurrection of Jesus. I think they claimed that someone stole the body and pretended they were dead, or I forgot what hypothesis they put,
right.
but yeah, they have some crazy hypothesis like that in the, and it's a historical. Even skeptics are like, like, what are you talking about? But yeah, let's say, all right,
Yeah.
we don't really. What's up? Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, let alone the fact that the Muslim claim of that didn't come around till, I mean, 600 plus years later. So, I mean, it's one of those things where, are you going to believe something that came way later, or the documents we have that came from that century, and I mean, let alone just barely decades afterwards?
Yeah, and the weird thing is that in Islam they require it, like the truth to know, for no one to have the truth in the first 600 years, which is insane. So I mean, of course, they go against the divinity of Jesus, and the thing is that we have a first century connection even from outside sources. So with Pliny the Younger, so he knew that one of the reasons they were killing Christians because they give them 3 opportunities to repent and to worship Caesar and allow pretty much polytheism. So they knew Christians were monotheists. Yet he also claims that they were worshiping Jesus as a monotheist deity, and they know Christians also worship Yahweh. So they Pliny the Younger pretty much it's admitting that not admitting, is recording that these Christians were monotheists and they were worshiping Jesus, and they knew that it derived from the God of Judaism. So if we got that, and since he was killing Christians 20 years before the year 100, so around the year 80 after Christ.
Mm-hmm.
So that puts it in the first century. So if we have like external evidence in the first century, I mean, like, what else do the Muslims want? And that's just one. There's a couple more in the first century, and there's other stuff in the second one, and of course in the third one. So we do have external evidence and more
Mm-hmm.
about the divinity of Jesus and the Trinity. But yeah, I guess
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe it's St. Paul says. I don't believe there was any mass hallucinations. I don't believe there were 500 witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know if you want me to take it or you take it.
You can take it.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So you don't believe it, but again, we go back to the examples of abduction, of abductive reasoning. So we go back to explanatory scope again. So let's say your hypothesis that it didn't appear to 500 witnesses. Well, in my case, we do have evidence that it appeared at least to some witnesses. So let's say you want to be skeptical, okay, not 500, but if I can prove that he appeared to several witnesses, or at least make it extremely likely that he appeared to several witnesses, then your case becomes more weaker. And part of that comes into the also the fourth part of the minimal facts case of Gary Habermas, which is about how the apostles were willing to die. So they were dying in martyrdom even in the until the third century. They're put in stakes. They were burned and lighting the Romans parties that they were having. So they were going into very humiliating and painful martyrdom. And I mean, Pliny the Younger was killing Christians like crazy. That is one thing. But so when it comes to Paul, Paul was an enemy of the faith. It appeared to him, and we know that his letters are as reliable as they get. We know that at least so even skeptics, as skeptics are I think they accept like 4 or 7 they accept a certain number of Paul's epistles, and the thing is that even in those, if they're reliable, you do get a case for Paul believing the resurrection and actually endorsing his testimony that Jesus appeared on it. And if you don't trust trustful historical sources, I mean, if you don't trust history, if you don't trust pretty much trustworthy sources, you cannot trust any historical claims out there. So you would have a bit of an uphill battle, my friend. But yeah, we may. You want to add something?
Oh, yeah, just in regards to history, I mean, we know for a fact that there were external historical documents recording that about people who followed the way, the teachings of Jesus Christ, very early on around that time period. And that's not contested. But if you applied that same logic of what the reliability of the Gospels to those documents, then it seems that doubt is unfounded in regards to history. For instance, we know about I have a couple notes here, but about Caesar's Gallic War. That wasn't written until 900 years later, when we have our first manuscript copies of it. So the fact that we have such an early attestation to what the gospel documents were saying, let alone the fact that the early church leaders loved to quote scripture and write about what they believed. So the amount that we have really give reason to believe that the events that occurred in those documents were true events, because the amount of people with real experiences from that day that it recorded those things really give way to believe that it's a reliable testimony, it's trustworthy, that we don't need to doubt history, because at the same way there's not really any way to prove the past except for examining past records. If we didn't have any records, then we couldn't prove anything. If we didn't have records that Abraham Lincoln existed, we couldn't prove anything. But we do have records, and we have records of Christ also, that he existed, what he did, what he taught, what his followers believed afterwards about him. And it's very clear that what his earliest followers believed afterwards about him is consistent with what he taught himself in those documents.
Nice. And I'm going to go back to another question that we skipped. Yeah, St. Paul says, we don't even really know if they witnessed anything. The Gospels were written at least 30 years after Jesus died. Come on, man. Like, you're even more uncharitable than the skeptic scholars. Like, some skeptic scholars, they put it 12, 15 years. 30, you're pretty much cherry picking as skeptical as it gets. But there's even some scholars that put it up to 8 years in connection, because of sightings of Paul. But one of the most important things I want to mention is about oral tradition. So the apostles, they didn't just listen to the stuff Jesus said just once, and just like the broken telephone. They just like that's the problem with the broken telephone. So you're not whispering, you're not saying it with the intention of the other person not grasping it, you're not doing it with the intention of the message not being conveyed. You're doing it with the being repeated with the intention of being grasped. You get Q&As of that. And a very important thing is that we do know that, for example, like the Sermon of the Mount, it was preached by Jesus up to around 32 times, 35. I forgot the exact number, but it's over 30 times. So if the Sermon of the Mount was preached over 30 times and other stuff multiple times, I mean, I think 30 times is plenty of time to learn what Jesus is trying to say, and you have the person there, you can ask the Q&A. So if oral tradition, I'm sorry, oral tradition does have a pretty high value, especially when it's you live in a place where they didn't have much of printing available, so they relied a lot of oral tradition. So it was as reliable as it gets in those times. So even if you want to be uncharitable and put as 30 years, which it's not, I mean, and then I'm going to be uncharitable to you, and I'm just going to use the 8 years. So I mean, oral tradition was instant. It was where it happens, and I think he's getting it. I'm not sure if he was confused by putting it 30 years after, because yeah, I'm not sure. There was some confusion there on his part, but because sometimes people confuse the after Jesus died with the year that it happened. So if it's like in year 35 or 40, they're like they may confuse like, oh, 40 years after Jesus. No, in the year 40. So from the birth of Jesus. So some people, they make that mistake, but yeah. So oral tradition. So therefore, you will have to prove that oral tradition is unreliable or untrustworthy. But I don't know if you want to add something. You're good? Okay. Uh,
Yeah.
we have no evidence. Paul saw the risen Jesus again. So, what is your standard of evidence? What is your standard of proof? We will ask you the same thing. So, I mean, I bring abductive reasoning again. So, we have some evidence, and we based our base explanation based on what available evidence we have. So, it depends how he's going with that. I don't know if you want to add something or we go with the next one.
I think I feel like you explained it well enough. Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add to that.
Okay, here's St. Paul asking pretty much for our testimony. So he's asking, why are you guys Christians? When do you turn to Christ? So you can go first if you want. Yeah, he's asking, can you hear me? Hey, Nick, can you hear me?
Let's see. Do you want to go first or?
You go first. I'll go second.
Okay.
Or I'll go first. I'll go first if you want. Okay, so what am I Christian?
Oh, sorry. I thought. Yeah, I think it cut out right there, so I thought you said that you'll go first.
Oh,
I
no, no,
can go
no.
first. I'm
Yeah,
fine with
go
that.
ahead. Go ahead.
So for me, I am a Christian because I'm convinced that what is taught in the Old and New Testament by God is an accurate way of understanding reality as I experience it. And I'm convinced that it's the objective, that it shows objective reality pertain to faith. So, for instance, the Bible talks about the creation account, it talks about the massive flood, it talks about the hearts of men and what we're like. And I feel like those are accurate things. I'm convinced that they're true. And I turned to Christ personally when, let's see, I was Catholic for majority of my life, but my family was nominally Catholic. We would go on weekend, on holidays, things like that. But later on in life, I mean, I started doubting. I saw a lot of things in the Catholic Church that I was like, doesn't seem it doesn't seem correct, and it doesn't seem to accurately portray what the Bible teaches. So later on, I became a Protestant. I challenged my beliefs as a Catholic, went and researched, and I came out realizing that, yeah, the Catholic Church is wrong on some things. I'm convinced of that. But I'm not convinced that God isn't real, and I'm not convinced that Jesus Christ didn't really come and that his teachings aren't accurate. So that would have been around the age of 17 is when I completed like all my research and wrestling and whatnot. And I still struggle and wrestle with things today, but that's not, I would say at that point, I was a true Christian. I had faith in Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and I want to add something to something very interesting that you mentioned about regeneration, about being a new creature. So I would say that's pretty much like what it takes for everybody, every Christian to become a Christian, a direct experience. And this is something very interesting in epistemology. In most of the models, even models that atheists hold to, they start with what is called direct acquaintance, which is about we start with experiences. Why? Because experiences don't need to be justified; they come already yeah, there's nothing to justify as you are having something direct. You're having an experience, and so when it comes to Christians, we claim to experience regeneration, something extraordinary that happens to fit very closely to the explanation of regeneration as according to scriptures. So, if our experience is already justified, or at least for us, that brings the probability for the case for theism in general, because if you got a if the majority of people are theists, and let's say we got a big portion of Christians, then a large amount of the population is justified to be a Christian already. So the question for skeptics will be, why would everybody else that has not have a regenerative experience, how would we be justifying believing in Jesus Christ? So yeah, I agree that's where the main issue is. But yeah, we do start with direct acquaintance. We do start with experiences that we I have experienced answered prayers. Oh, and by the way, in my testimony, I was a Christian for all my life. Then I went into a period of skepticism. Even I became agnostic for a bit, and then once I got into epistemology, that was the means that God used to bring regeneration onto my life. And I had answered prayers. I had also seen a miracle, not seen, sorry, known someone extremely close that had a extremely documented miracle. He's got records of 62 surgeries, 3 doctors that told him he was going to be dead, more than 100 court cases recorded. And I lived with him for a while, for about 6 months, and saw the pain he was in, the surgeries, and a lot of the whole deal. And in the testimony of him, there was a lot of supernatural stuff that it's way too it's too much of a coincidence to be skeptical. So you become more irrational if as you a lot of stuff have to be coincidence for you to accept it. So I would see all these things, and things were piling up, experiences, and also getting into apologetics and answering some of my most of my objections I had, which were to the Old Testament, to textual criticism, the resurrection, arguments for the existence of God, and stuff like that. And yeah, so epistemology did it for me, but I guess regeneration was the main dish for me. But I guess we just have 2 last questions. One is 500. We have no way to validate there was 500 eyewitnesses. So when it comes to that, yes, we may not have for the 500 specifically, like one source for each one, or one eyewitness testimony for each one. But the what we were arguing is that we have some sources to validate at least some of those things, and we don't have contrary evidence. So I'm not making an argument of silence, but that does weaken your case, my friend. I don't know if you want to add something.
Yeah, I would just say, so with something like that, I'll restate in a little bit of a different way, but we are blessed today with all the tools we have to be able to certainly record something so that we can provide it to future generations who maybe didn't experience it like we did. But that's very recent in history that we're able to do that. For a long time, writing things down, that was the way you recorded history. So if you're establishing that burden on ancient documents, then you wouldn't be able to be assured, even if Columbus was the one who actually came over to North America, because all we have are documents saying such a thing. That's all we have. They didn't have the same blessings we have now of being able to video record or auditorily record things so that we can present. That was their written word. So I'd say if you're doubting that, you would have to apply that same logic to a lot of other historical accounts also.
Awesome. And I guess we just have one last. It's not much of a question. It's much of a goodbye that Saint Paul. I don't know if he's if it refers to Saint Paul, like his name, like his username, but it's a little bit or Santiago Paulo, or I don't know what it's short of. But my friend, thank you so much for your questions. Yeah, you were nice enough too, so we appreciate the cordiality. He says, you guys seem nice enough, but you're just using apologetics. Anyways, have a good night. So we're just using apologetics.
That's
I don't know how to respond to that. I mean, what's wrong with it? So the thing is, we're trying to make a case on how when we analyze evidence, we can use abductive reasoning, and yeah, we pretty much have the consensus, at least, and the last part when it comes to competing hypotheses, at least the consensus of unbelievers or skeptics in New Testament history did abandon all the other competing hypotheses, and they just decided to, we're all going to say, I don't know, and just Hey, Nick, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
now I can hear you. I'm not sure what happened.
Sorry, yeah, my Wi-Fi went for a little bit, but before we close, do you have anything to say before we close?
Yeah, I think the only remarks I can think of, I really appreciated being able to be on the video with you today. I appreciated all the questions from you, Saint Paul, or Saint Paul, if that's what it's supposed to be. I'm not sure what it's but yeah, I appreciated your kindness also. And I would encourage, just because the video's over, your guys' questions are always open. You guys can feel free to look up me on Facebook. You guys can rant all you want to me if you guys so please. But but yeah, I always welcome questions. I'm not gonna sit here and be like, oh, you're just questioning, you don't have enough faith, and completely write you off. No, questioning is a part of life. We wouldn't become more certain of things if we didn't first deal with questions. So go ahead, bring all your questions. That's totally fine.
We have a group. It's called Apologist Assemble, and you guys, if you guys are watching this, you guys can post your questions there. And we have a big amount of apologists. We have around 22 that can answer your questions in those posts. If you guys looking for better answers that you may have that you may find in some other massive groups where you may get people that don't do streaming or or do stuff professionally, because we have some people with PhDs or some students with a master's, and some other streamers in that group. So if you guys want to go into that and just post a question and ask for help, even you guys can inbox us, send us a personal message, and I'll put some of my time to answer whatever questions that you may have. And I love this one right here from my friend Juan Meza. A shout out to my buddy here. It says, don't let your connection with God be like Israel's Wi-Fi. Don't get disconnected. Oh, this dude. But yeah, Nick, like, thank you so much for joining me today and fighting this battle by my side on the defending the Christian faith. So thank you so much for that, and thank you, Sam Paul, for your questions, and Juan Mesa for the trolling. But yeah, we'll see you guys in the next stream. Thank you so much for watching, for sticking with us, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Subscribe to Apologists Assemble on YouTube, and share, comment, like, and help us out. Thank you. Take care, guys.